a special panel by Shonglap, and the two guests, the founders of the journal, they are already here as our guests, Shaurit Bhattacharya and Orko Chattopadhyay. We welcome them. And the discussant and the chair for the panel will be our Professor Shubhro Saha. So over to you, Shubhro.
Yeah, Orko, are you here, Orkoda and Shoridda?
Yes, can you see me, Shubhro?
Not yet.
Okay, I have put my video on, but if you just pin me, then you can probably
Yeah,
see.
I can see both of you.
Okay, that's
right.
great.
Hi. Yeah. Good afternoon in one side and good evening in another side. Welcome for this last plenary session of Shonglap. I'm happy that we are able to host a session on Shonglap because we, as much as we need to know, the students as well as the emerging scholars also need to know the history of an emergent, very strong and promising journal, Shonglap, which started with 3 students, and now it is already in so many internationally renowned indexing areas, coming up with fantastic issues in every issue. So to briefly introduce, we have our 2 founding editors, Professor Shaurit Bhattacharya, who is also a lecturer in at the University of Glasgow, and he was one of our plenaries. Thank you, Professor Shaurit, for joining us again. And Professor Orko Chattopadhyay, who is from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Gandhinagar. Thank you again for joining this session on Shonglap. Just to briefly introduce Shonglap, because this presentation, the speaker is Shonglap. And therefore, I must introduce Shonglap also briefly, and then we will hear the entire journey, philosophy, and the trajectory of Shonglap. Shonglap was founded in January 2014 by Orko Chattopadhyay, Shaurit Bhattacharya, and Arunabh Banerjee, who were then doctoral candidates based in 3 different countries, Australia, the UK, and France. Since its inception, the founders were keen on publishing research in specific literary cultural areas by younger scholars who would otherwise find it difficult to publish high quality research in good journals for different academic, institutional, and socio-political or hierarchical reasons. Since then, Shonglap has continued to push forward a fresh thinking in not only the idea of humanities which we are dealing with, but also cultural studies, literary studies, performance studies, environmental humanities, and many broader spectrum or extensions of what we think as humanities. Shonglap, which started as a very young, fresh journal by 3 PhD students, is today already indexed by Directory of Open Access Journal, DOAS, MLA International Bibliography and MLA Directory of Periodicals, ProQuest, ERIPlus, OLCC, WorldCat Directories, Schematic.org, Universitat Bibliothek Regensburg, Road Directory of Open Access Journals, Library of Congress, British Library, National Library of Scotland, among others. We all hope that Shonglap continues to excel international academia with its huge prestigious name, and I now hand it over to the founding editors to listen the story of Shonglap. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shubhro. Am I audible?
Absolutely, clearly.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Shubhro, and thank you so much to the organizing team, Dr. Paromita Mukherjee, and the organizing team, everybody who has been sort of associated with this 3-day-long web conference. And thank you for giving us this space to talk about Shonglap, and also for this kind gesture that we often don't see in a university, especially in conferences, to sort of allow more of a young and sort of an open access journal to sort of espouse the philosophy of it, so to say. So as you have already pointed out, so we have basically reduced my labor here. So I just wanted to make sure that people know about Shonglap by some basic opening points and then hand it over to Orko. So I'll talk about the rationale behind Shonglap, why we sort of founded Shonglap, the rationale behind also the topics, why we choose these topics, etc., and how we conduct our operations, so to say. And then I'll be brief, of course, and then I'll hand it to Orko, and would probably talk about more about the recent developments of Shonglap and the humanities aspects as well. So briefly, as Shubhro has already mentioned, Shonglap began in 2014 January, and we were all PhD students back then. And one of the reasons, maybe one of the strongest reasons that we went for an academic journal was that we were all uprooted from our communities. I mean, all of us were based in university and local community structures where we were sort of associated, involved in magazines, journals, little magazines, any kind of sort of non-academic or academic work. And suddenly you are into a particular space, into more of a, let's say, in quote unquote, in the visa terms, alien space, and you're not finding those communities back. And both of us, Orko and I, have known each other for at least the last 15 years since we started BA in Presidency College in 2004. So both of us knew each other, that what we actually wanted from this particular journal. We didn't want it to be a creative journal from the beginning, also because of the fact that there was a proliferation of, and there has been a proliferation of literary and academic journals in 2010, 2012, when we were sort of getting to know about these journals, especially in India. And many of them were, of course, predatory in nature. I'm glad that UGC and other bodies are sort of being regulating this particular kind of predatory nature of journals, etc. So we wanted to make sure that we run a journal where young scholars, early career scholars could find a voice, people work really hard on their research areas, and they really want to be appreciated. So we wanted to make sure that it will be a peer-reviewed journal, and we wanted to make sure that we have a solid editorial board with people with credentials and who would also act as reviewers on certain occasions. So that was also a goal, and we're very glad, we're very sort of grateful that a lot of people who we approached in the beginning, initially thinking that they might find it sort of a doable plan, but you start with 2 PhD students starting a journal, sometimes might feel like it's a promise, but might not materialize. But almost all of them were sort of ready, or were glad that we were doing this, and were sort of definitely backing us up. And many of them are on the editorial board yet still today, and they are actively part of this process, the journal, the topic choice, or maybe like the review process, decision, any kind of editorial decision that we take on the journal level. And then what we did is we also wanted to make sure that this journal is going to be open access. We didn't know a lot about open access back in 2013-14, but we knew that this journal needs to have its research straight to people who are interested in this kind of things. They need not need some sort of a paywall to go beyond it, pay some money, or sort of a JSTOR or a Project Muse account to sort of have those things there. So in order to make it open access, and we were really fortunate that back in 2013 or 14 already OJS system, WordPress, etc. have already had developed. We studied ourselves because we didn't have a professional team. We didn't have money to sort of have a professional team. So we studied ourselves, and we sort of spoke with others who were professionals, and then Orunabo was taking care of it from the beginning. That Orunabo was always from the beginning making sure that we go for these and we go for those ones. We're very grateful. Orunabo is not there today with us on the board, but he's also a founding editor. And we also wanted to make sure that this journal will be subscription free. We didn't want anybody, and all the things that we were publishing in national journals, mostly in 2010-12, they were charging us plenty of money, and 2,000 rupees or something like that in 2012 for an MPhil candidate or an MA candidate would be a lot. And we wanted to make sure that we do not go for this route, because this route might just lead us to 70 odd publications in one issue, because now you're going for a profit driven agenda. I'm not saying like every journal which charges has a profit driven agenda, because you need that professional team, you need those sort of article reviewing process to go through, but like there is always the other side of it, the darker side of it. And frankly speaking, in the last 7 years we have not been struggling financially. We have not even raised money on the editorial board to run a journal on an open access, open journal system platform. So this is something that we wanted, and I'm so glad as part of the journal that we've been able to maintain that. We've all been busier, and as it is with academics, you get busier with every month, every year, and we just want to make sure that this journal goes on in the same way that it started. There are recent developments that have happened, of course, and Orko will definitely talk about it shortly. Just the final point that I would like to add, because we'd also like to have 5-10 minutes for any responses that you have. The final point I wanted to mention is the rationale behind choice of topics. So we wanted to make sure that this journal would focus on topics, themes, ideas, which are, of course, important, sort of contemporary, but also cutting edge. So we wanted to make sure that the journal is a literary journal that also cuts its edge with sort of environmental, sort of extra literary aspects. Right, so so the first issue that we did was on terror and the literary. So we were trying to make sure that what is it that is if there is an aesthetics of terror, and if how does this aesthetic sort of collide with the politics of terrorizing, or sort of terror making, so to say, and what is the politics, especially worldwide politics behind terror. So these were, and from there on we went for themes like democracy, resistance and literature, and then environmental humanities, critiquing humanism, city, space and literature, etc., etc. So and the most recent ones, so in September, there will be one published on pedagogy and in the post-colony, especially academic higher education, English and academic higher education, and how pedagogy works. And then in the next one is going to be cultures of sexuality. So in some cases, as I'm sure like Orko will tell more specifically, in some cases we have had open issues, but they're also themed, such as cultures of sexuality, which are not being edited by anybody other than that we are, of course, the chief editors. But there are also these themed guest edited issues that we have developed. So pedagogy in the post-colony is being guest edited by candidates and sort of academics from India. So this is something I just wanted to make sure that we have a journal that is open access, peer reviewed and subscription free, and sort of wants to sort of make sure that different kinds of humanities studies are being brought upon into the fold of this young journal from the very beginning. And I'm glad that we've been able to sort of maintain that for the last 7 years. So I'll just now hand it over to Orko for his part, and then we'll probably have some minutes, if it is possible, for any discussions that we could have. So over to you, Orko.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shorit. And am I audible to everybody? Okay. Is it audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So first and foremost, it was a very thoughtful gesture on the part of Professor Shah and the organizing committee of this conference to have us speak about our journal that we have, been, let's say, fostering in certain ways for the last 6 years. Not to repeat, but to consolidate on some of the points Shorit has already made. So there was a certain desire for an academic community formation among us when we started this journal as doctoral students in another country in relation to the country of our birth at that point. Even now, we continue to be spread out. Shorit is in Scotland, UK, I'm in India. And we have always mapped this journal as a transnational exercise, not as a nationalized journal, which is Indian in that sense. Yes, it's a journal which has its roots in India, but it's not really an Indian journal in that sense. And I think we've been very fortunate from the very beginning to have a certain kind of regional, national, and international diversity in terms of the contributors. So just to give you an idea, in the very first issue, as you know, to do an online journal, the first issue initially does not have an ISSN number. It is retrospectively given an ISSN number, and we worked for it, and we got an ISSN. And it was quite difficult. Thanks to Arunabho, it was possible because both of us were outside India at that point, and the ISSN procedure had to be routed through letters to Delhi and so on, which wasn't very easy with us in other countries. Arunabho was great help there, and I must acknowledge him. But to come back to the point, the very first issue that Shaurit spoke of, Terror and the Literary, already had contributors from, from Portugal, from US, from India, from Sri Lanka. Even within India, we had that kind of diversity. There were, contributors from Assam, contributors from Bengal, and we have tried as far as possible to maintain that diversity in the journal. Yes, it's very strongly, it's a journal which very strongly advocates early career research and early career research excellence. Both of us, technically speaking, are still early career researchers. We were PhD students when we started. And with all humility, we would want this journal to be a place where excellent early career researchers, without compromising on academic rigor, can publish their research articles. And we've been extremely attentive towards this, the dangers, the caveats that Shaurit has already very clearly marked out. It's an ethics of open access, I would say, which is also largely speaking in a philosophical way about the freedom of knowledge, right? The freedom of knowledge systems and also the freedom of acquiring knowledge. A lot of insecurity has crept into academia, has crept into not just humanities, but broadly speaking, academia. As we speak in a digital platform nowadays, there's again insecurity about publication, about the dissemination of research, which is also changing with times, right? So in spite of those insecurities, I'm not going to dismiss any of them. They might have their own, very strong grounds. We would continue to try and, maintain the academic rigor of double-blind peer reviewing, and at the same time, try and make that balance work. So again, to give you an idea, the way we have worked is that almost for every issue that Shaurit and I have edited as themed open issues for the journal, we have approached a certain number of people, generally senior academics, for articles. And there have been one or two invited articles almost in every issue. But we have also opened up a call for papers for every open home issue. Okay, I'm sorry, though something happened on my end. Hopefully, I'm still connected, right?
Yeah,
okay.
you are.
Fine.
You are.
Fine. Okay, thank you. So, right. So there was this. So we've continuously tried to make it cutting edge, as Shaurit was saying, by subscribing to this idea of a themed issue, which not all journals do, as you well know. There are open issues without themes. But we have insisted on thematizing every issue, be it a guest-edited issue or a home issue. To speak a little more about the rationalization of the subjects, again, we've also gone by a certain logic of urgency. What are the topics? What are the discussion points within humanities, social sciences, cultural studies that perhaps merit an issue? So that's a logic we have, by and large, tried to follow. And it's a matter of great joy for us that in the last couple of years, we have steadily received call for papers and requests and processings for guest-edited issues. So we've already done one guest-edited issue on South Asian Studies and Translation, which came out of an international conference, and it was pitched to us as an invited issue. We've done another one on caste recently. We've done one on city space and literature. So, of course, because we are two founding editors with our limited number of research interests, we thought it's a good idea to open this journal up for different kinds of discussions coming in from different kinds of expertise, which of course cannot always come from us. As we speak now, we are already, as a journal, we have this pipeline for the next couple of years where we have, one home issue, open but themed home issue, edited by Shorit and me, and one issue edited by guest editors for the next 2 years. So we already have at that kind of a pipeline, which is a matter of great pleasure for us, because it seems from that, from whatever we can understand from that gesture, from that response, that Shonglap, the word itself has this notion of conversation built into it, right? Has been able to converse. Shonglap has been able to converse with, different communities within the academia. I'll very quickly finish with one or two points about humanities, broadly speaking, which again makes me come back to the titular term itself, Shonglap, right? So Shonglap as conversation is this idea of opening up conversations, but not at the cost of losing a disciplinary bearing. So I would like to insist on this point because sometimes, on occasions, interdisciplinary humanities has been risking the whole idea of a kind of disciplinary training, which I personally think, and again here I'm speaking on my own and not as merely an advocate for Shonglap, there could be issues with that. And I'm also addressing the larger conference theme here, humanities and its entanglements. So I personally think when we are talking about interdisciplinary work, it's not a bad idea to have a grounding in one discipline and then branch out into another one, or maybe multiple disciplines, and cut across those disciplines or fields. And again, from a literature studies point of view, be it, and as someone who works on philosophy and literature primarily, I can say for myself at least that philosophy and literature are intrinsically transdisciplinary fields. They're intrinsically transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary. So we don't necessarily need to lose out on one of the disciplines in order to be able to be sort of interdisciplinary. I mean, I'm just being a little bit critical of this buzzword of interdisciplinarity. Interdisciplinarity is advisable, but not at the level of that buzzword, maybe. And again, of course, this is a debate we could open up and we could discuss this among the commentary among the group after I finish. To talk about a few things that we added on, and I'll finish with this last point, that, okay, so with time, we added a review section. We are now going to add from the next issue onwards a translation section. And we are going to deliberately try and represent untranslated literature from various marginal traditions in that particular section. We have respective editors for each of those sections. We have already started doing a virtual seminar series called Considerations. Again, I would request you to go to our website and check out a page which has all the details. We are doing these virtual seminars on YouTube, and they are archived on YouTube in Shonglap's channel. We are also in the process of planning a section on opinion pieces, which are going to be, of course, somewhat different from the regular issue format. They will be coming out independently as standalone opinion pieces. Again, we are planning on having a particular academic there as a series editor. So there are these new feathers we are trying to, this cap, as it were, trying to add to this cap. I'll finish with this idea that Shonglap is committed to an egalitarian and non-nationalized, non-institutionalized. It's also important that we have not made this an institutional journal. We could have done that, but we have not. And we have continued to be an independent entity which has its own political ethics, which is informed by its own political ethics of critique and intervention. With that, I would perhaps close this discussion and open it up for any questions and comments from the audience. Thank you once again, and let me also air a very, embarrassing note of apology that it's not just because of technical glitches, but also because, unlike in many other academic institutions in India, in IIT Gandhinagar, we are in the middle of a fully functional digital semester. So we are teaching all the courses, we are doing all the MA, we have an MA program here, and it is disciplinary humanities program. We are doing all that supervision work and the doctoral supervision work. So I've not been able to attend as many sessions I would have ideally liked to attend in this wonderful conference put together by Amity University, Kolkata, and I apologize for that. With that, I'll hand it over to Professor Shaha to conduct the proceedings. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think one of our keynote, Cecil has something to say. Cecil was raising her hand. I am making Cecil presenter. Yeah, Cecil, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and for your endeavors to take things into your own hand, which is really wonderful to discover. And I'm actually now I'm looking forward very much to discovering all your publications. I just wanted to say how inspiring your comment on translation is, because I used to think about the problem in particular for me between the languages that I have to straddle, German, French, and English, which is only a small, and a lot of works, German authors, French and English are already well translated. But I always thought that one of the problems Europe has, for instance, is that key intellectual works from languages that are less translated remain untranslated. And unless we can bring the axiomatic of these different cultures, these thoughts that sink into the sediment of a culture, to communicate with each other, to appreciate each other, it's very difficult for a union to be also cultural and for people to begin to understand each other and appreciate each other. So your idea of including a section of translations is definitely something that I'm going to include in my own editorial endeavors and propose to people. I'm working on the journal for the Collège International de Philosophie, and they have started now publishing both in French and English. But I think I'm going to make it a project to try and have a section in the editorial projects in which I am involved for key texts to be translated from languages that are not as exposed in English and French, in German, or whichever language it happens to be. So thank you very much, very inspiring. I really look forward to discovering more of your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cecil. Just to add to Cecil's point and to introduce both of you to each other, Cecil is the principal translator of Simondon's book on the mode of existence. And thank you, I was telling thank you to Cecil for making people like us to read and introduce Simondon in English language. And for Cecil, I would also like to know you that they are also doing a similar kind of a task with Navarun Bhattacharya, because they are coming up with a Bloomsbury edition of critical essays on Navarun Bhattacharya, which is, I think, one of the first internationally book that is entirely dedicated to Navarun Bhattacharya, which has translations and essays by Supriya Chaudhary. I think Orkoda also has one translation, and Shamrat Sengupta also. So they have also translated many of the important works of Navarun Bhattacharya. It was nice to see the translator coming and asking the editors who are also translators and working for a long time as translators. Yeah, I would like to hear.
Shubhro, if I may, very briefly, to be relevant to the topic as well, that book germinated through a Shonglap issue that we did on Navarun after he passed away. So there is a Shonglap connection here. And it also, I suppose, speaks something about the fact that it was always let's say, a passion project for us. I mean, we were not just trying to make noise. We were also trying to be, truthful to our passions. I mean, when Navarun passed away, as readers of Navarun, both of us felt we should do a dedicatory supplement, which we did. And that was the germination of this book. Though the essays are entirely different and the translations are also mostly different. There are only one or two translations, but they have been heavily reworked for the book. But thank you so much.
Thank you, and that's one of the reasons that I felt that in this themed conference, Shonglap should share some of their experiences, because in the most of the journals that we see, there is a clear purpose, which is not what we can call a purpose that is related to the community, whether the academic community or the community one belongs to. And I have always felt fascinated by this kind of endeavors which you had been doing from the very beginning, to not just create an journal that comes out as a excellent journal coming out for, let's say, Taylor Francis or some university press, but a journal which has a purpose, which every issue they have a purpose. They serve a very strong social, academic, and a deep a purpose with some responsibility. And I like that. Every issue has that, and also you now shared that you felt and that urge that we should also offer a tribute to Nabarun Bhattacharya, and therefore you organized a special edition. So thank you. I hope that this kind of attempts come more frequently from more journals in India and abroad, which come very strongly with a purpose and not just for creating a journal and circulation of text.